In a world of pixelated fantasies and the relentless buzz of social media notifications, I found solace in a love that felt authentic. My name is Emma, and this is my story. It begins with joy, then spirals into a tragedy of my own making, all because I believed in the illusion of love. Daniel and I met at a mutual friend's wedding. The setting sun had turned the sky into an artist's palette of oranges and pinks, and laughter filled the air like the tinkling of wind chimes. It was poetic, almost cinematic, the way our eyes met across the crowd. He was impeccably dressed, his tailored suit hugging his frame like it was made just for him, which it probably was. "Hi, I'm Daniel," he introduced himself, offering a hand that was as warm as his smile. "Emma," I said, taking his hand and feeling an instant connection. From that day on, we were inseparable. He wooed me in the most charming ways. Surprise dates, handwritten love letters, even a serenade under my window one night, which would have been embarrassing if it wasn't so endearing. I thought I'd found my soulmate, my partner in life, and couldn't wait to begin our journey together. Then there was Angela, Daniel's mother. She was the sort of woman whose presence you could feel even before you saw her. The first time I met her was at a family dinner Daniel had arranged so we could all get acquainted. "Ah, so you're the Emma we've heard so much about," Angela said, looking me up and down like I was some sort of exhibit. "You're prettier in the photos." I laughed nervously, not sure how to respond. Daniel jumped in, oblivious to his mother's cutting remark. "Mom, come on! Isn't she beautiful?" Angela forced a smile. "Oh, I didn't mean it that way, dear. You know how photos always enhance our looks. No offense meant." As our relationship progressed and the wedding plans started, the digs and snipes from Angela escalated. Dress fittings turned into minefields, the choice of flowers became a battleground, and the guest list felt like a game of Russian roulette. "You should invite your second cousin Jerry. He's a lawyer, you know," Angela would often suggest, subtly implying that my family's lack of pedigree was a stain on their otherwise illustrious lineage. Daniel was no help, dismissing it as just the way she is. Finally, the wedding day arrived. I was a bundle of nerves and excitement, my stomach a whirlpool of butterflies and hope. But even on this day, Angela couldn't resist taking a jab at me. "Emma, it's surprising you managed to wear white," she whispered as I was about to walk down the aisle. I looked at her, shocked and hurt. "What's that supposed to mean?" Daniel, standing beside me, chuckled. "Oh, Mom, you're so funny." Funny. I couldn't believe he found it amusing. But I let it go. It was my wedding day. After all, a day for love, unity, and the beginning of a new chapter in life. How was I to know then that this chapter would be one of despair and loneliness? The illusion of love is a powerful thing. It can make you overlook red flags, ignore your instincts, and put your faith in fairy tales. As I walked down the aisle, my heart full of love and eyes brimming with tears of happiness, I had no idea that the woman smirking behind her son's back would soon turn my life into a living nightmare. In that moment, I was the epitome of blissful ignorance, floating on a cloud of romantic ideals. I didn't see the storm on the horizon, didn't recognize the omen that was Angela, or the complacency that was Daniel. And so, with a heart full of love and a head full of dreams, I stepped into what I thought was my forever. I was gravely mistaken. When Daniel and I returned from our honeymoon, a magical 2 weeks in Bali, I was still floating on cloud 9. We moved into my house, a charming two-story I had purchased before meeting him. It was in a quiet neighborhood, and I had put a lot of effort into making it a home. Little did I know, it was about to become the stage for my daily torment. Angela's visits began almost immediately, and the pattern was always the same. She'd arrive unannounced, wearing an expression of disapproval like it was part of her ensemble. "Emma, darling, you really should consider getting new curtains. These are dreadfully out of style," she'd say within seconds of walking in. "Actually, I like them," I would respond, holding my tongue in temper. Daniel would usually jump in with, "Mom's got a point, Emma." It was maddening. They critiqued everything. My cooking, my choices in furniture, even the way I folded laundry. According to Angela, I couldn't do anything right. Once, I cooked a special 3-course meal, putting hours into preparation and presentation. Angela's reaction was nothing short of devastating. "Mary, did you actually make this? Or is this takeout disguised as home cooking?" she scoffed, taking a tiny bite from her fork and then pushing the plate away. "I made it, Angela. I thought you'd like it," I said, trying to hide the hurt in my voice. Daniel, as always, sided with his mother. "Emma, if Mom says it could be better, it's because she has experience. Don't take it personally." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I looked from Daniel to Angela, both wearing matching smirks. It was as if they were in this together, a tag team set to bring me down. As time went on, the snide remarks and veiled insults became increasingly difficult to brush off. Angela critiqued my clothes, the cleanliness of the house, and even questioned my ability to make Daniel happy in the long run. "Daniel has always had such high standards, you know. His ex-girlfriend, Catherine, was a wonderful cook and an excellent homemaker," she'd say, sipping her tea with an air of arrogance. I'd clenched my teeth at that comment. "Well, I'm not Catherine, and Daniel chose to be with me." Daniel shrugged, looking apathetic rather than supportive. "Catherine was good at those things, Emma, but you have other qualities." Those other qualities were never specified. It was always about what I lacked, never about what I brought into Daniel's life. The criticism escalated with each visit. I felt scrutinized in my own home as if I was a guest, rather than the person who actually owned the place. Each time the doorbell rang and I found Angela at the door, my stomach sank and a sense of impending doom settled over me. It was like living on the edge, never knowing when the next insult or critique would come, but knowing that it was only a matter of time. Angela's behavior and Daniel's complacency took a toll on me. It was exhausting to constantly defend myself and my choices in my own home. But more than that, it was heartbreaking to see the man I loved, the man I had committed my life to, allowing his mother to belittle me at every turn. My home had become a battlefield, and I was losing ground with each passing day. As Angela continued to mark her territory with her toxic comments, and Daniel simply stood by, I knew something had to change. I just didn't know how bad things would get before they did. In that house, surrounded by my things yet feeling utterly displaced, I slowly began to see the truth. I was not an equal in this relationship. I was an intruder in a story that had been written long before I entered the scene. The worst part? The next act was about to begin, and it was a plot twist I never saw coming. The day Angela became a permanent fixture in my home started like any other. I was in the kitchen trying out a new recipe that I hoped would meet the lofty standards of my household critics when the door swung open. I turned, and there was Angela rolling in a suitcase behind her. My heart sank into my stomach like a stone thrown into a pond. "I hope you don't mind, darling," she began, a sly grin spreading across her face. "But my building is being renovated for the next few months. I thought it'd be a nice opportunity for some family bonding." I was stunned, looking at Daniel for some sign that this was a joke. "Are you serious?" I blurted out. Daniel shifted his weight uncomfortably before speaking. "Well, Emma, Mom does need a place to stay, and we have the space. It's the right thing to do." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The right thing to do. Daniel, she can't just move in without asking us. Asking me. Angela chuckled softly. "Oh, Emma, you're part of this family now. You should learn to share." That was the moment when my life turned into an endless nightmare, like a record stuck on a loop, replaying the worst parts over and over again. The weeks that followed were a blur of ceaseless demands, constant bickering, and unrelenting stress. "Emma, I've put my clothes in the wash. Be a dear and hang them for me, won't you?" Angela would command, as if it was my duty to serve her. "Daniel, I don't think it's fair that I have to do chores for your mother, especially without being consulted on her moving in," I tried to reason with him one evening. He looked at me as if I had asked for the moon. "Emma, she's my mother. We have to take care of her." "But at what cost, Daniel? At the cost of our marriage? At the cost of my sanity?" I shot back, my patience eroding away like a cliffside battered by a relentless sea. Daniel sighed, running his fingers through his hair in frustration. "Can't you just get along with her? You're making things difficult for no reason." And so, I became the unpaid maid, the emotional punching bag, and the scapegoat for all of Angela's whims and fancies. I cleaned after her, cooked for her, and even put up with her constant nitpicking about how I should be living my life. "Emma, you really should consider going on a diet. A woman must maintain her figure, especially now that you're a married woman," she'd say, eyeing me from head to toe with a critical glare. Or during one of the rare moments when I sat down to relax. "Emma, you're wasting time. Shouldn't you be doing something productive, like learning to cook a proper meal or tending to your husband's needs?" Despite being the breadwinner, supporting both Daniel and Angela, since neither had a job, my value was reduced to what I could do around the house. They seemed oblivious to the fact that I was juggling a high-paying job and household chores, while also suffering from emotional and psychological abuse on a daily basis. "You really should get a job, Emma," Daniel said one evening with an air of self-righteousness, as if he was completely unaware that my income was the reason we could afford our lifestyle. That's when I knew I couldn't take it anymore. I was drowning, my head barely above water, gasping for air but finding none. Daniel and Angela had built an alliance that I couldn't penetrate, a fortress designed to keep me out while exploiting me at the same time. As I looked around the home that no longer felt like mine, one thing became crystal clear. I had to escape this prison they had created for me, but not without making them regret the day they took me for granted. I had been pushed to my limits, and now it was time for retribution. After all, they say revenge is a dish best served cold, and I was about to serve it ice cold. The days melded into one long gray smear. Time felt like it had stretched and elongated, each second a tiny eternity. I was in survival mode, functioning on autopilot. Work offered a little escape, but even there, I was plagued by the thought of returning to the house at the end of the day, a house that had become my prison. A typical day began with Angela barging into our room. No knock, no courtesy, just a full-on invasion. "Wake up, Emma. Breakfast won't make itself," she'd announce as if she was the warden in this twisted jail. With a heavy sigh, I'd get out of bed and drag myself to the kitchen. Daniel would already be there, sipping his coffee, immersed in his phone. "Morning," he'd murmur, not bothering to look up. The routine was stifling. Prepare breakfast, clean up, get ready for work. Endure backhanded compliments or outright insults. Head to work. Come home, cook dinner, more criticism, and sleep. If I could even call tossing and turning in bed sleep. If I could even call tossing and turning in bed sleep. While I was making dinner one evening, Angela walked into the kitchen, scrutinizing every move I made. "You know, Emma, you really should take some cooking classes. You have a lot to learn if you're going to keep a man happy." "Angela, cooking doesn't keep a man happy. Love, respect, and mutual support do," I retorted, fed up with her archaic views. She chuckled. "You're naive if you think that's all it takes. A woman needs to know her place, and part of that is ensuring her man is well, fed, and satisfied." Just then, Daniel walked in. "Smells great, Emma." Before I could answer, Angela jumped in. Daniel nodded, almost robotically. "Well, practice makes perfect, right?" In that moment, I felt a twinge of something I hadn't felt in a while. Resentment towards Daniel. Here he was, supposed to be my partner, the person who should have my back, yet he was letting his mother dismantle my self-esteem brick by brick. Weekends were no better. They were an extended version of the nightmare that was my life, minus the brief respite work provided. On Sundays, Angela had a new ritual: family cleaning day. "Emma, I noticed the baseboards are quite dusty. And when was the last time these windows were cleaned?" Angela would start her list of chores, handed out like decrees from a queen to her serfs. "I cleaned the windows last weekend," I'd say, barely keeping the irritation out of my voice. Daniel would chime in, "Well, if Mom says they're dirty, you must have spot." Angela smirked triumphantly. "See, even Daniel agrees with me." It was as if I had become a modern-day Cinderella, with chores piling up and a step-family constantly criticizing me. But there was no fairy godmother on the horizon, no magical transformation, and most distressingly, no prince. Daniel had become a stranger, a spectator in the suffering that his mother orchestrated and relished. How had it come to this? When had I become this shell of a person, meekly taking this degradation? Each day felt like another layer of me was being peeled away, leaving behind a raw, vulnerable core. And then it hit me. I was allowing this to happen. I was giving them the power to break me down, to make me feel insignificant in my own life. And it was time to take that power back. It was as if a dormant part of me suddenly woke up, a part that I had buried deep within in the name of love and family. That part was angry, and it demanded justice. It screamed for revenge. As I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, a plan started to form in my mind. A plan to reclaim my life, my home, and my dignity. A plan that would turn the tables and give Angela and Daniel a taste of their own bitter medicine. They had pushed me into a corner, but they had forgotten one thing. Even a cornered animal will fight when it has nothing left to lose. And fight I would. That fateful evening started like any other. I returned from work, mentally drained but physically restless, steeling myself for the icy atmosphere that had become the norm in my own home. The scent of something burning greeted me as I opened the door. I rushed to the kitchen and found Angela angrily stirring a pot on the stove, an inferno of disdain in her eyes. "Finally, you're home," she spat out the words. "I tried cooking dinner, but I can't work with this low-quality kitchenware you have." Fuming but determined to hold my ground, I responded, "If you don't like my kitchen, Angela, you're more than welcome not to use it." Just as the words left my mouth, Daniel walked in. "What's going on here?" "Ask your wife," Angela shot back, tossing the wooden spoon into the sink with a clang. Her cheap taste in kitchenware is the culprit. Ignoring his mother, Daniel turned to me. "Emma, you know better than to buy low-quality stuff." "What were you thinking?" That was the straw that broke the camel's back. What was I thinking? I was thinking that I'd use my hard-earned money to provide for this household while both of you sit around doing nothing. Daniel's face turned a shade of red that I had never seen before. "You ungrateful woman. Do you think money is everything? You're a gold digger? That's what you are." Angela jumped in, a venomous smile forming on her lips. "I told you, Daniel. She was only after your potential inheritance." Looks like I was right. My hands were shaking, my heart pounding in my chest. "I'm a gold digger. You both live under my roof, eat the food I buy, and use the amenities I pay for. And yet, I'm a gold digger?" Angela scoffed. "This was never your house. It's Daniel's house." "That's where you're wrong," I retorted, my eyes meeting Daniel's. This house is in my name, bought with my money. You both are nothing more than guests here, and it's time you started acting like it." Angela looked like she had been slapped. Daniel seemed lost for words. I seized the moment to lay down the law. "Daniel, if you can't respect me, your wife, in my own home, then you have no place here. And Angela, if you think you can bully me in my sanctuary, you're gravely mistaken." Daniel seemed to snap back to reality. "You can't kick us out. I'm your husband." "I can and I will. I've been speaking to a lawyer, preparing for this moment. I've been documenting every insult, every instance of harassment, every time you both made me feel worthless in my own home. If you think you can walk all over me, you're in for a rude awakening." Silence filled the room. Angela looked like she had swallowed a lemon, and Daniel stared at me as if he was seeing me for the first time. "That's it! I want both of you out. I'll be filing for divorce, Daniel, and I will be pressing charges for emotional distress, Angela." As I walked away, Angela called after me, her voice hinged with desperation. "You'll regret this, Emma. You'll die alone." I turned around, locking eyes with her. "I'd rather be alone than spend another second in this toxic environment you've created. Get out of my house." And with that, I retreated to my room, my body trembling, but my spirit unbreakable. This was the turning point. From here on out, I was taking back control of my life, and God help anyone who stood in my way. I picked up my phone and dialed my lawyer's number. It was time to set the wheels of justice in motion. I was done being the victim. It was time to become the architect of their comeuppance. Courtrooms have an air of finality about them. The wooden benches, the judge's high seat, the solemnity that permeates the room. Everything screams of decisions that can't be undone. As I sat there, dressed in my most professional attire, I looked over at Daniel and Angela. For the first time, they seemed out of their element, nervous and unsure. My lawyer, Claire, was an embodiment of professional tenacity. When she presented my case, complete with the endless accounts of harassment, emotional abuse, and financial leeching, it was ironclad. She brought up evidence, texts, voice recordings, and even some security footage from our home that showed the severity of their behavior. "Your Honor, my client has been subjected to relentless emotional and psychological abuse under her own roof. Moreover, she has been the primary financial provider, which makes this not just a case of domestic abuse, but also of financial exploitation." Daniel's lawyer stuttered through his defense. "Your Honor, while it's true that there have been disagreements between my client and his wife, labeling it as abuse is an exaggeration." The judge looked unimpressed. "Exaggeration or not, Mrs. Thompson has provided substantial evidence which warrants not only the divorce, but also damages for emotional distress. Mr. Thompson, Mrs. Thompson's request for a $30,000 settlement for emotional distress is approved, and for the record, I suggest you get your act together." Post-trial, as we gathered our papers, Angela approached me, her eyes brimming with unshed tears. "You destroyed our family, Emma. Are you happy now?" I looked her square in the eyes. "Your actions destroyed this family. I just brought it into the light. And yes, I'm content, knowing that justice has been served." Daniel looked like a man who had been stripped of his armor, vulnerable and defeated. "Emma, you didn't have to do this. We could have worked things out." "Worked things out? You never worked anything out, Daniel. You just sided with your mother and allowed her to treat me like trash in my own home. This was long overdue." Without another word, I turned my back on them and walked out of the courtroom, feeling lighter than I had in months. I had won, not just the case, but my self-respect and freedom. That evening, the house was eerily quiet. For the first time in a long time, it was peaceful. No snide remarks, no passive, aggressive jabs, just tranquility. I poured myself a glass of wine, relishing the taste of victory. As I sat on the porch, I received a message from Claire. The court order has been executed. They have 48 hours to vacate your property. And vacate they did. Watching them leave, their faces twisted in humiliation, I felt no joy, no triumphant exhilaration. What I felt was a calm sense of closure. They had underestimated me, and they had paid the price. As I closed the door behind them, I took a deep breath, savoring the newfound emptiness of my home, a void that I could now fill with love, respect, and peace. It didn't take long for the word to get out. My story was an emblematic tale of reclaiming one's dignity against all odds. Friends and colleagues who had distanced themselves during my dark days started reaching out, offering words of support and admiration. But the sweetest revenge wasn't the money or even the public disgrace that Daniel and Angela had to endure. The sweetest revenge was my regained sense of self, the knowledge that I was not broken or defeated. I had stood up against my oppressors, and I had won. In the end, revenge wasn't about making them suffer. It was about making sure that I never suffered again. I had fought for my freedom and had earned it, every last bit of it. This chapter of my life was finally closed, sealed with the gavel's last bang in a courtroom that smelled of wood and justice. And as for the next chapter, that was yet to be written, but one thing was clear. I was the one who would be holding the pen. Years had passed since the courtroom drama that had reshaped my life. My existence was a far cry from the emotional and psychological cesspool it had once been. I had climbed the corporate ladder, secured a position that not only paid well, but also gave me a profound sense of accomplishment. My home was exactly that, a home filled with tranquility, free from the toxic chains that had once bound me. I spent my days focusing on what mattered: my career, my well-being, and the relationships with family and friends who genuinely cared for me. As for Daniel and Angela, they had become mere footnotes in a chapter I had long closed. But as fate would have it, our paths were destined to cross one last time. It was a chilly evening, and I was walking back home after a gratifying day at work. Taking a shortcut through a less frequented alley, I noticed a disheveled figure huddled against the brick wall, surrounded by empty bottles and remnants of a life gone awry. As I walked closer, my heart skipped a beat. Our eyes met. The man who had once looked at me with disdain was now staring at me with eyes full of regret. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but couldn't find the words. "Emma, I don't need an apology, Daniel. What's done is done," he sighed, looking down at the ground. "I never thought life would come to this. After you kicked us out, nobody wanted to help. Even relatives turned their backs. My mom moved in with some distant cousins, and He gestured vaguely at the sad state of his life, strewn around him like discarded trash. "I was wrong, Emma. I was so wrong about so many things." For a moment, a part of me wanted to feel pity for him, but that emotion was fleeting, quickly, overshadowed by the memory of what he and his mother had done to me. "I hope you take this as a lesson, Daniel. Life has a way of teaching us what we refuse to learn willingly. You and your mother had numerous chances to do right by me, but you chose otherwise, and here we are." He looked up, his eyes searching mine for a shred of compassion. "Is there any way to make it right? Can we start anew?" I paused, pondering his words. It would have been so easy to take him back, to show the world that I was the bigger person. But some bridges are burned not for the sake of pettiness, but for the sake of peace. "No, Daniel, we can't start anew. Our paths diverged a long time ago. It's better for both of us to go our separate ways." And with that, I turned my back on him and walked away. His sobs faded into the background, drowned out by the sound of my heels clicking on the pavement, each step taking me further away from my past and closer to a future I had built for myself. I felt neither vindication nor guilt. Instead, what I felt was a sense of profound understanding that our lives had come full circle. We were both reaping what we had sowed, albeit in starkly different ways. I had sown seeds of resilience and self-respect, and in return, life had given me a field full of opportunities and happiness. Daniel, on the other hand, had sown seeds of disrespect and entitlement, and life had left him with a barren field of despair. As I reached my home, that beautiful sanctuary built on the foundations of my hard work and perseverance, I realized that the best revenge had never been about making Daniel or Angela suffer. It was about flourishing despite them, about building a life so full that their absence became an afterthought. So, when I closed my front door behind me, it wasn't just a wooden frame that shut behind me. It was the final chapter of a turbulent past. I was ready to write new chapters, free from the shadows of Daniel and Angela, emboldened by the strength that had come from overcoming them. I took off my heels, poured myself a glass of fine wine, and raised a silent toast to the woman I had become. A survivor, a victor, a woman reborn. And so, life moved on as it always does. But one thing was certain. Whatever came my way, I was ready. After all, I had faced the worst and emerged not just unbroken but stronger, wiser, and indomitably free. The circle was complete, and so was I.